things and not keep everybody waiting. My name is Joanne Navy, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Edwardsville Area. My co-president is having trouble accessing the thing. So Becky Ellis is prepared to introduce the speaker. So I was not prepared to do that. Okay, Becky,
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Joanne. So tonight, it's our pleasure to welcome Judge Kyle Napp to speak to us on the criminal justice system in Madison County and her work on some of the alternative justice programs. So this is kind of a follow-up to our interest in criminal justice and restorative justice in general. We've had a lot of discussions on that, and we've watched the community go through some discussions on that. So tonight, Judge Napp is the presiding chief judge of the criminal division. She helped found the Madison County Child Advocacy Center. And she is also the presiding judge for the alternative drug court and the mental health court. So, and she said she might also talk about some of the challenges she's had of working in the justice system during the COVID-19 pandemic. So of note, in 2003, she worked with Senator Bill Hayne to create the Madison County Child Advocacy Center, which allows child victims and those who witness violent crimes to be interviewed in a safe, child-friendly setting. They conduct the interview by a forensic interviewer with input from a multidisciplinary team made up of police, DCFS, and state's attorney's office. So since its inception, the center has interviewed in excess of 5,000 children.
What is the name of the center again, please?
It is the Madison County Child Advocacy Center.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Excuse me, I've had a little technical issue here too. We were plagued with them today. So in 2021, Judge Napp is named presiding chief judge of the criminal division. So she handles the felony trial docket call and is also the presiding judge of the alternative drug court and mental health court. And the goal of those courts is to enable people who have a drug or alcohol addiction or who have been diagnosed with mental health issues and who have unfortunately come into contact with the criminal justice system, give them an opportunity to become productive members of society. So they're offered treatment, counseling, and the development of skills needed to make healthy choices, with the end goal to help these people lead law-abiding, happy, productive lives and not become another sad statistics, not get coming back to the criminal justice system. So with that, I would like to just welcome Judge Napp and turn the program over to her.
Thank you. So I've included a PowerPoint that I'm going to use sometimes during this presentation. I will say that the PowerPoint was actually created in 2019 when we went, the specialty courts went and did some education at a number of different places, and we used these PowerPoints. I haven't had the opportunity to update the PowerPoint, and I apologize for that. I'm actually in the middle of a jury trial right now. I've been in one all week, and I got home about 1 hour ago. And was able to get my college-age daughter to help me get this PowerPoint up on this laptop so that I could be speaking to all of you. So I'm going to use the PowerPoint, but I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening at the Criminal Justice Center. So for a little background, I started as an assistant state's attorney in 1993. I worked in the juvenile division handling abuse and neglect and delinquency cases. And then I worked my way up through the office, and I ended up becoming the lead trial counsel for violent crimes. And I did that until 2007. And during that time, I really worked a lot with the child abuse, sex abuse cases. And that's how I ended up becoming involved with forming the Child Advocacy Center. And I'd like to say that if you're looking for another speaker in the future, Carrie Cohan is the director of the Madison County Child Advocacy Center. She's great, and I know she would be happy to speak with your organizations in the future should you be interested in that. But in 2007, I applied for and was appointed an associate judge. In Madison County, there are 9 circuit judges who are elected by all of you. And then there are 13 associate judges who are appointed by the 9 circuits. So in 2007, I was appointed as an associate judge, and I worked in the family division for a couple of years. And then I was transferred to the criminal division, where I've been working ever since. In 2012, I ran for circuit judge, and I won my election, and I became a circuit judge. And then I was retained in 2018 by all of you. And then just this year, actually December of 2020, I was appointed the presiding judge of the criminal division, which I have to say is a little surreal, because I started out as an assistant state's attorney trying cases in front of Judge Romani, who was the chief presiding judge. And to know that I was kind of stepping into his shoes, because that's who he was I can't believe I was that old that I could actually be doing that, but there it is. So I am the first woman to be named presiding judge of the criminal division, and I was pretty excited about that as well. So when I became a judge over in the criminal division, I carry a felony docket call. So currently I am assigned all murders, class X and class 1 felonies. I share that with another judge. And then there are 3 other judges in the building who handle lower class felonies as well. But I also am the presiding judge of the drug court and the mental health court. I love working with these courts. I get to be more involved with the people in these courts, and I think it makes a big difference for them and their success. I could choose, as the presiding judge, I don't have to do those courts. I could assign those to other judges, but I care passionately about them. And that's actually how I met Keith, who talked me into this speaking tonight, because he is involved with Community Restorative Board, which is one of the entities that works with our court, and I'll talk about that as well. So I love doing these courts. I feel they're very important, and so I've been doing them for over 10 years now. But I also handle a docket, which means I have trials, which is why this week I'm actually in the middle of a jury trial. And so it's been a little hectic this week. So there are 3 specialty courts in Madison County. There's the Veterans Court, there's the Drug Court, and there's the Mental Health Court. Judge Sarah Smith is the presiding judge of the Veterans Court, and she's the most appropriate person to be handling that court, as she herself is a veteran. And I think she's currently a colonel or a lieutenant colonel in the military. She serves both as a judge and in the military, so she can relate very well to the clients that are in the Veterans Court. The Drug Court and the Mental Health Court I preside over. And so those are our 3 courts. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the courts, and I'm going to use the PowerPoint to go with that. The PowerPoint that I'm showing you tonight, I actually worked with the team members on my drug court to create this PowerPoint. And it's really when we were dealing with, and still are dealing with, the opioid crisis that kind of ravaged our county. It actually ravaged the whole state of Illinois and the country. So we were dealing with the opioid crisis, and so we were going out to try to educate people about our courts, and to get everyone understanding why it's important that we have these specialty courts. So let's see if I can. We have over 3,100 courts nationwide, drug courts, that serve over 136,000 people. Our drug court was formed in 1996, and we were the very first drug court in the state of Illinois, which I think is pretty phenomenal that Judge Ferguson at the time had the foresight to understand how valuable these courts would become years later. In 2017, the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts implemented rules that required all of the specialty courts to become certified. Up until then, everybody just ran them however they saw fit within each county, and our administrative office decided we needed to be more uniformed. We received our first certification in 2017, and we actually were recertified just this year in 2021. So a lot of people wonder, well, should we have drug court or should these people just go to prison? And I have some numbers for you. In 2019, it noted that our prisons could hold up to 32,000 people. And there were approximately almost 44,000 people in IDOC. So obviously our prisons are overpopulated. There was a study in 2015, and unfortunately for Illinois at that time, we ranked as the #1 most overpopulated prison system in the nation.
Wow.
Ouch.
It costs about $22,000 a year to house a prisoner in the Department of Corrections. And the average cost for a drug court participant is about $4,000, a little less than $4,000. In 2000, I only had statistics up through 2018 when I did this PowerPoint. So I didn't get to update it. But as you can see, the number of deaths from heroin or opioid climbed dramatically every year. And in 2018, we had 109 overdose deaths from either heroin, opioid, or fentanyl, or a mixture thereof. And I'd like to thank Steve Nahn, our coroner, because he's always helping me get updates and statistics. So I appreciate them sharing that with me. In this slide really talks about Madison County versus Illinois versus the US. In 2014, Illinois averaged about 12.2 overdose deaths. In Madison County alone, we had 81 overdose deaths. So clearly we were way above the average overdose deaths for the state. More people die from heroin or fentanyl overdose than traffic related deaths or gun violence. In the United States, there is an opioid or heroin death every 20 minutes, and 95% of the opioids are consumed in the United States, and the rest of the world makes up the 5% of opioid use. So the United States clearly uses opioids. And I can say from my personal experience that most of the clients in the drug court started their opioid use because of painkillers. They started out using painkillers for an injury or just because they could get them out of their parents' cabinets. And they started with just using painkillers. And then when they couldn't get those by prescription anymore, that's when they started using heroin or fentanyl, which I will talk about those drugs in a moment. Our drug court is governed by a statute, and the drug court is made up of a team, and that team consists of me, 4 probation officers who work closely with the drug court clients. There is a coordinator for all of the specialty courts. His name is Kevin McKee, and Kevin was going to be a part of this presentation, but he has children and they have things like, soccer and baseball and all kinds of stuff going on. So I let him off the mat for this presentation. A probation supervisor who's part of our drug court. There's an assistant state's attorney who attends every drug court, a public defender who attends every drug court, and a liaison for the public defender's office to try to help work with those clients. And then we have treatment providers. We work specifically with Chestnut and Centerstone. In mental health court, we work with Chestnut and Centerstone. In our drug court, we work with just Chestnut. And part of that is because we have grants that pay, and I talk about this a little later on. We have grants that pay for the treatment. And so we have to write it into our grant who we're working with. And so they have to pass a lot of certifications to be able to be a provider. We can't just throw anyone in. They have to be approved by the grant providers and by the AOIC. We receive funding from the Madison County Board, from the 708 Board, our mental health court board. And then we also receive grants that help pay for some of our probation officers for some of our courts. So we have a high-risk probation officer for all 3 of our courts. We have 2 of them. And those high-risk probation officers will go they'll go do welfare checks at their homes. They will go do curfew checks, because in a minute I'll talk about all the rules that we have for our drug court, but they'll go and every night they'll knock on doors and make sure people are home where they're supposed to be. They'll make sure people are in court. They'll help get them to treatment if they need to. So we have these probation officers, high-risk probation officers, who also will then go and arrest people if they don't show up for drug court. We'll have them go picked up and brought so that we can see them immediately. Part of the success of the court is having immediate reaction to problems that they're encountering. If they need to get to treatment, if they need to be taken to residential, if they need to be seen by a judge because they violated in some way, we try to do that immediately rather than, a month down the road, we're trying to talk to them about something that became a problem. And I'll throw in something about the drug court. We continued to work even during COVID, and even when the courts were shut down, we met by Zoom. We had meetings by Zoom, and the treatment providers set up treatment through Zoom, and people could pull it up on their phones, or if they had computers, and we still managed to talk about what treatment they needed and work with all of them throughout the entire time of COVID. We worked with all of the clients in our drug court. We have a grant, a special grant called the Redeploy Grant, and the Redeploy Grant works closely with the Community Restorative Board as well. The Redeploy Grant is this: if someone's charged with a class 3 or 4 felony, and they've probably been to prison before, or they have enough priors that the state's asking for them to go to prison, they can ask to come into the drug court if they have a qualifying offense under the Redeploy Grant. And the Redeploy Grant is really to stop them from going to prison. It brings them into our court rather than to go to prison. If they end up not making it through the court, then they end up going to prison at the end. So if they quit or get violated and are terminated, they end up going to prison, but we give them the opportunity to avoid prison. And one of the requirements for the Redeploy Grant is that these individuals must work with the Community Restorative Board to do some community service, to give back to the community. So they work with the Community Restorative Board to come up with different places that they can go and do their community service. To participate in the drug court, and really to participate in any of our specialty courts, you have to be a Madison County resident. You have to be at least 18 years of age. You have to be charged with or convicted of, it used to be a nonviolent felony, but I will tell you that that has changed. The law has changed, and we can now allow in some violent felonies. And by a violent felony, I'll give you an example. If someone's charged with domestic battery, for instance, a lot of times in mental health court, we have clients who suffer from mental illness, but they still live at home with their parents, and their violence involves their parents. And their parents really want them involved in the mental health court because we get them a psychiatric provider. We make sure they're taking their medications. We work with them on getting Social Security disability. We work with them on finding jobs and maybe finding other housing. So a lot of times the parents or guardians of these individuals want them in our court. And so the law changed to allow us to be able to let these individuals into our specialty courts. But I'll say that the state's attorney always speaks with the victims before they would allow them to come into the courts. So they always work with them. Clients, it used to be you could only come into a specialty court one time and then you were out. If you violated, you could never come back. And that the law has changed. You can come back again, even if you've been through the drug court or mental health court or vet court before. To be in the vet court, you have to have been a veteran, and you have to meet certain qualifications for vet court. There are some individuals who might have gone into the military, but they weren't in it long enough to qualify for vet court. So that's one of the qualifications for vet court. But for the drug court and mental health court, the only qualifications are be a resident, be 18, anyone can make a referral for these courts. A judge can make a referral. Sometimes when I'm seeing people after having been arrested, I will see them and ask them if they'd be interested in coming into the drug court. And so I can make the referral. A family member can make the referral. A provider can make the referral. Their attorney can also. A defendant can request to be evaluated for these courts. So anyone can make the referral for any of our courts. But the key is, and this is where people get hung up, is that the client has to agree to come into the court. I can never just order someone to come into one of these courts without their agreement. So if they don't want to come into the court, then they cannot be forced into participating in these courts. Now, if they don't want to come into drug court, and let's say they just get put on probation, they can still be ordered to do treatment and to get treatment through probation, but it wouldn't be with our court and with a lot of the details that our court offer that probation on its own just doesn't. And I'll talk about that. There are 3 different levels or entries into our court: diversion, adjudication, and adjudication prison. So diversion applies to people who don't have any prior felony convictions and they don't want to have a conviction on their record. So if they come into our court and successfully complete it, they will get their case dismissed at the end of successfully completing drug court or mental health court or vet court. Track 2 or adjudication is they are pleading guilty and they are agreeing to participate in our court. And when they're done, their probation will be successfully terminated, but they will still have a conviction on the record. And then redeploy, I've talked to you about. A defendant pleads guilty because they're trying to avoid going to prison. So drug court is hard. I'm not even going to try to make it sound like it's something easy, because it's not. And when they're all in jail talking about it, it's funny because they will try to convince people not to go into the drug court. Most of the participants have to attend residential treatment, which is usually a 28-day residential up in Bloomington. Some go to long-term treatment after that, but almost all end up having to do some type of residential treatment. They have to attend treatment, outpatient treatment with Chestnut at least, it starts out 4 times a week, and then it can decrease as they are doing well, but 4 times a week, 3 hours a day. They're all placed on curfews. The curfews change as they phase up through the program. They have to attend anywhere from 2 to 7 AA, NA, or we also allow, it's called Smart Recovery or Celebrate Recovery, different type of recovery programs. And we allow those to in place of AA or NA. They are randomly drug tested every week throughout the entire time that they're in drug court. And they sometimes will have to be tested even in court. I'll just randomly ask someone to give a drop. They have to attend court. Initially, it's every week, and then it's every 2 weeks, and then it's every 3 weeks, and then it's every 4 weeks, and then it's every 6 weeks. As they phase up, there are 5 phases in our court, and as they phase up, how often they come to court starts to decrease. They have to meet with their probation officer weekly. If they don't have their high school diploma, they have to earn their GED while in the program or make a valiant effort to try to pass the GED. Occasionally, we've had someone who just truly couldn't. They could not pass the GED. We've gotten them tutors, we've signed them up for classes, and they have tried and they just can't. And in that case, we would make the exception, but they have to show real effort before we would do that. Before they can graduate, they have to have a job. They have to complete a community service project. They have to complete the 5 phases of drug court. In mental health court, there are 4 phases, but in drug court, we have 5 phases. And they have to be drug-free for at least 90 days before they could phase up to the next phase. In talking about community service, I'd like to add, so it was a few years ago that we were contacted by, it's called SWAP, Sheriff's Work Alternative Program. And it's a program where our sheriff has someone that will take out probationers, and they will go do community service projects, picking up trash on the side of the road, cleaning up the cemeteries, going and helping set up for the county fair, going to set up for any type of not-for-profit event. They can get them to do that. So we were contacted because the Lions Club, and now it might be the Rotary Club too in Edwardsville, but they always sell the trees on in front of the old Schnucks. They would set up their Christmas tree lot every year. Well, the members got too few and maybe a little older, and setting up all the Christmas trees became a real problem. So they contacted the sheriff, who contacted me, and every year now we agree, all of the drug court and all of the probation officers and all of the attorneys and me, we all go and we go help set up the Christmas tree lot for, used to be Lions Club. I think the Rotary might be taking it over, but we do that every year now. It's just one of those things that I think for the clients in the drug court, participating in the community and being a part of the community and doing some good makes them feel good. And it makes them realize that there's something else out there for them. Maybe they didn't grow up in a place where anyone even talked about community service or did community service. So for them to go out and do something is very important to them. And they really like it, and everyone looks forward to it. And actually this year we also did some sandbagging. It ended up not being needed, but they wanted us to do some sandbagging, and they called again and asked if we would be interested in doing that. So as a group, I'm trying to find a community project, I'd say quarterly, that our court can go do and help. It makes them feel good, and I think it gives them an opportunity to be a part of the community. So that's something that we've been doing for the last few years as well. So these statistics are from 2019. So I will throw that out there, but we've had over 1,500 drug court clients, over 6,000 defendants were screened and either declined or were found ineligible. 76 clients in the drug court. We've increased our maximum to 125. But that's the max that we could have in our drug courts. 52% are male and 48% are 52% are female and 48% are male. So we're about half and half. 95% are white and 5% are minority. 65% range in age from 25 to 34. And the next highest age group is age 35 to 44 at 21%. We've had 11 clients overdose and die while in the program, and that statistic has actually raised to 15 at this time. The average time to gain entry from entry to graduation is 14 months. And normally probation is a 2-year minimum. So a benefit of drug court is that you can get done with your probation earlier if you participate in the drug court. On average, we have about 5 babies born to a mother in our program a year, and that statistic has increased. We've had more babies born than that. And I like to think that these babies are born healthy and well, and in the past, they would not have been. And many of the clients participating in the court, their children have been taken from them. And by participating in the program, they've been able to get their children back. I have one particular client who graduated, and she had been abused by both of her parents, had used drugs with both of her parents. She was 17 when she first got charged, turned 18, came into the program, failed it, was terminated. She came back at the age of 23. She was going to die. There was nothing else for her. And she agreed to go to long-term treatment. She went, she did phenomenal. we wrote letters to her, encouraging her, and we have maintained contact with her all these years. She was able to get her son back, who she'd never had custody of. She has a job. She is doing phenomenal. He just graduated from kindergarten, and she sent pictures. And she says that we saved her life, and I think she saved her own life. But with that being said, that's what you're trying to do in the drug court, is let people go out. And she said she never knew that life could be this. So it was pretty wonderful. 98% of the graduates either have their high school diploma or their GED. And 65% of the drug court graduates will test positive for drugs at least once while in the drug court. 85% of our clients are on medically assisted treatment. We call it MAT. And what that is, there is a drug that if you get put on it, it will prevent you. I'm going to dumb it down. If there's a medical professional on here, I'm really sorry. I'm dumbing it down. It's a drug that prevents them from getting high if they're using heroin or fentanyl or alcohol. And so many of the clients will go on this medically assisted treatment to get this injection because it helps them not use the heroin, the fentanyl, or the alcohol. The problem is that the shot itself costs over $1,000 a month. So that's expensive, and insurance will pay for some. The second problem is that for the addict who's not ready to get clean, they just switch drugs. They switch from heroin and fentanyl to methamphetamine because the medically assisted, that particular injection doesn't work on methamphetamine. So they change their drug if they really want to get high and they're on the shot. So, but that's what medically assisted treatment is. We don't use methadone in our drug court. Chestnut doesn't use methadone. Some people, that was what they would use. The problem is methadone, it still gets them high, and many of them will then sell their methadone to make money. So methadone is not something that we use, but as part of our medically assisted treatment. All the graduates have jobs when they graduate, and 95% of the drug court clients have reported using heroin or opiates, with the next highest drug being methamphetamine. Individuals in drug court are 6 times more likely to be kept in treatment long enough to prevent a relapse after graduation. So there was a study done, and I think it comes up in a future slide, where Dr. Jewell, a professor at SIUE, did a study on our drug court, and it was actually in a published journal in 2017, and it studied the long-term effectiveness of drug courts, and he gathered data over a 6-year period. So he went and talked to every drug court client when they started in the program, when they graduated from the program, and then 3.5 years after graduation, where are they at now? What's happened to them? So it was a long study, and what he found was that people who declined or withdrew from drug court were 4 times more likely to reoffend than those who graduated. He also found that people who withdrew or declined drug court were 3 times more likely to reoffend within a year of discharge. And that the people who withdrew or declined drug court would reoffend at a higher class of felony than those who graduated, but also reoffended thereafter. So that was a pretty good study for us that showed that drug court really does work. That should be the end of the slides. So I'll leave that up. Kevin is our drug court coordinator. The drug court secretary is not Suzanne Johnson anymore because she's moved positions, but that phone number is still a good phone number should you want to reach the drug court. So I was going to talk about just a couple other things. COVID and the criminal justice system and what we've been doing, and where we're at right now with the changes happening on bail and pretrial release. So with COVID, we were shut down for quite a while and we could not have jury trials. But we have started back up and we are having jury trials, and we are taking precautions because of COVID and ensuring the safety of everybody involved. We've added jury weeks so that we can get more trials in, and we are setting pretrials for all of the defendants who are in custody 120 days or longer. We are setting pretrials to find out where that case is at and get it set on the trial docket to try and ensure that their speedy trial rights are followed. We have, as far as COVID and its effect on jury trials, the biggest problem we're having right now in Madison County is simply space. Because of the guidelines, we're still required at this point to keep people 6 feet apart, and hopefully that's going to change here pretty soon. But until it does, we're limited on how many jurors we can put into a room, and we're limited on how many people we can have in the courtroom during a trial. So we're having to use up 2 courtrooms for 1 trial. And obviously that means if we're using those 2 courtrooms for 1 trial, we can't use that courtroom for other things. So that's been really the biggest problem we've faced, but it's hopefully going to change here soon, and we'll be able to then even have more than right now. We can have 1 criminal jury trial a week, and hopefully that will change so that we can include to have more jury trials. There is, you might have heard and you might not, but there's new laws that were passed in Illinois that will take place in a couple years, doing away with cash bond. And there's a lot of misinformation about it, and there's a lot of fear about it without really knowing what it entails. Those changes take place in a couple of years, and we are forming our committee in Madison County to ensure that we're going to be up to speed and ready to go when that goes into place. We are one of, I think, 5 counties that are participating with the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts to do a 3-day training on pretrial release and how to handle all of it. It's an intensive 3 days, and we have agreed to be a part of that so that we can try to get up to speed as well. But I would say this, our county has about 263,000 people in the county, and there are currently 270 people in our jail. So in the statistics of how many people are in custody versus our population, 270 is a really small number. Our county, for years, we released a lot of people without having them post bond on nonviolent offenses. It's just been our practice because our jail just isn't big enough to house all these people. So nonviolent offenders were getting released already. So some of the things that the governor has passed in this legislation, we were already doing because we had to. Our jail can house 300 people, and we were, at a point where we needed to make sure we could release people. And when COVID hit, we did a lot more with electronic monitoring, and we released people, nonviolent offenders, and we're trying to do more with pretrial release to ensure that the people getting released aren't reoffending and that our community is safe, but that we're still following all the laws that we need to follow. So I'm not as concerned about the no bail as I think a lot of people are, simply because I think we've already been, in my mind, doing a lot of what got passed already. So I think I've talked a lot. So if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Anything?
So the 2 murder cases are getting ready to go to trial. Is that correct?
I'm
The
not-
Lads and Gory.
So I can't talk about specific cases. I'm not allowed to.
Mhm.
But I can say that we are setting cases for all cases for pretrial. If they've been in custody over 120 days, and we are moving those cases forward as far as ensuring that this discovery is ready to go, that the state's attorney and the defense attorneys are all moving in that direction. And so I know that Judge Schrader is the other judge that's been handling the murder, Class X, Class 1 felonies with, he and I do those. So I know he is doing the same thing, that we're setting them all for hearing and ensuring that those cases are moving forward.
I know you said that Madison County was the first in the state. How many other counties have adopted these drug courts?
So I want to say there's some smaller counties that they're too small to have their own drug court, but maybe the circuit as a whole, or they might join with a few other counties to have a drug court. I know the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts has encouraged the specialty courts. So for instance, I know we have our 3 courts. St. Clair County, I know, has their specialty courts. Jersey County, I don't believe has a veterans court or a mental health court, but I think they have a drug court. So the thing about the specialty courts is that they are labor intensive. A lot of people are involved in ensuring that these courts go forward. These probation officers meet with these individuals every week. They go down to treatment. They are coming to court all the time. They're preparing reports about their meetings with them. So it's a pretty labor intensive court, and some jurisdictions just don't have that, don't have the people available. And the other thing about the courts is that to keep them functioning, you have to apply for grants. And if you've ever applied for a grant, you know it's a nightmare. I mean, whew. So I filled out the last grant application. I worked on it, but I had one to work from already. It's a lot. And there's just some counties where they say, we're not willing to go through all of the hoops that the people that are giving you the grants want you to do. They want you to fill out reports all the time and statistics and numbers. And so some of the counties just don't want to do that, and they don't have the money then to start up their courts. So I can't give you a number. I apologize, and I'll get one and send that to you. But there are many in the state of Illinois.
I appreciate you doing this because I think you're making our communities a lot safer. I was so excited in the past when I learned that this was, they started with the mental health court, because we have so many juveniles in the past that have become criminals because they didn't get the help that they need. So I'm very pleased with what's happening. Thank you.
Well, thank you. There's a current young man in my mental health court, and I have to tell you, everyone feels helpless at times. And this young man this is his second time in my mental health court. He's from the Madison Venice area. He's homeless. He's in his mid-20s, but he's been homeless since he was 18. He's been mentally ill his whole life. He commits, I call them petty crimes, because he's homeless and sometimes it's cold and he wants a warm place to stay and he wants food. But he's also aggravating because he can be annoying, but that's his mental illness. It's not who he is, it's part of his mental illness. So we get him back into our program, and we can't find a place for him to stay because none of the homeless shelters want to take him because they all know him and he's a problem. And I get it. We don't have a place to put him. We can't find a home for him. He doesn't have any money. So we've all put our money in to get him, gift cards, because we can't give him cash because he's not responsible enough for that. We've taken him to a homeless shelter in St. Louis, then driven him back and forth for our court. We have tried to get him into multiple different places. And you have a judge, a probation officer, a treatment provider, a public defender. everyone in there fighting, trying to help this young man get someplace safe, and we still haven't succeeded. So I can't imagine what someone on their own, a parent, faces trying to make that happen for their child. I will say, I think our mental health system, there's no money supporting it. The providers are overworked and underpaid. And we used to have 50,000 beds for the mentally ill in Illinois. And then there was that huge budget crunch 20 years ago. And we're down to like less than 5,000 beds for the mentally ill. So they didn't just get better. They didn't all just magically become better because we don't have the beds anymore. They just now are on the streets or in prisons is where they end up.
Alton State was closed. Is that correct?
It is closed. There's still the forensic division that's open, and that's for the violent offenders who've been found unfit. So that area at Alton State is open, but the rest of it is all closed.
And is that because of the big budget cut, or why was it closed?
The budget. It closed years ago
Really?
when the budget cuts hit.
So nothing was established in its place.
Correct.
Wow. Yeah.
There was a push at one time to get people out of mental health. We go round and round with it. They get them out
Mm-hmm.
in their communities, and then we realize it's not working. So our history has tried many different things, but they haven't dealt sometimes with the issues. I'm really glad to see you dealing with the issues. Again, thank you.
Judge Knapp, I wonder if I might just share a brief story really quickly. We recently had a gentleman in the adult redeploy program who needed to do his volunteer hours, and we found an opportunity for him to work with a nonprofit building wheelchair ramps for children, for families who couldn't afford to do that on their own. And it was really meaningful for him. I mean, not only did he feel like he had really done something that was good and helpful, which it truly was, but he also met some really nice, decent people in the whole project. And I think it gave him an opportunity to spend time with folks who perhaps gave him a different vision of what life could be and what he could contribute. And he just, I think, had the time of his life. And that's sort of what we try to do with these opportunities. I mean, there's nothing wrong with picking up trash on the highway. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But we like to try to find opportunities that introduce these clients to good people, good opportunities to give back, where they can just really walk away from it and say, hey, that was great. I was glad to be a part of that. So, and I'll also say, as an old ER doc in Madison County, that when Alton Mental Health closed down and some of the other places, that was a real loss for those of us caring for some of these people in the emergency department.
All
Yeah.
right.
They go to the ER because they're mentally ill, and then at the ER they are combative, or they won't leave because they're not getting admitted. And then when they won't leave, they get arrested and charged. And that's really how we end up with many of our mental health clients, is because, but we had a young man who just graduated. He's originally from Chicago, but he was going to school at SIUE. He had a terrible episode and called the police. And when the police were there, he got combative with them. And so he got arrested. He came into the court. He ended up graduating in December from SIUE. He was still in our court. We had a little party for him for graduating from college. And he has a job, and he moved back to Chicago, and he was awesome, but he had a lot of family support and help, and and I'm glad our court was there for him, because if he hadn't been able to come into our court and then successfully get it dismissed, he wouldn't have the job that he has. So, you know, it's
Mhm.
it was nice to have that opportunity, I'll say.
Do the patrol, the probation officers, what kind of training do they have?
So the probation officers, I believe all of them have college degrees. The ones that are high risk officers actually have to go do a training, a 40-hour training. Some of them, because the high risk officers carry a weapon. So they all have to go to a training and do continuous training to be able to carry their weapon. And most of the probation officers, I would say most, not all, but most are either criminal justice or they went to the academy. Some of them went to the police academy actually, and then ultimately decided to become probation officers versus police officers. So
I was wondering, is there any movement in terms of the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis, that there is any kind of decrease in the numbers, or is it still just going up?
I don't think it's going up. I think that it is about the same number. I think COVID kind of put a damper on our statistics in the sense of the reality of the statistics. I don't know that we have all of the numbers in because of COVID. I will say I think I see more methamphetamine in my drug court right now than others, but fentanyl is so dangerous. The description, the picture wasn't in this particular PowerPoint, but the problem is fentanyl, like, I'll give an example, like truly like 2 grains of salt is what fentanyl, that's what fentanyl would, that amount versus, you know, 100 grains of salt for heroin. So people mix fentanyl with heroin to get a bigger high, but if they put too much fentanyl in, they just die. And so the problem is for a lot of the clients, if they're in jail and they get out and they're dope sick and they'll go and use it the same amount that they were using before, but they've been in jail for a week. So when they get out, they're not really ready for how much they're using and they just overdose and die. And fentanyl is just so dangerous. It's infinitely more dangerous than heroin. And that's what they've been using and cutting into their heroin. We lost a young woman a few months ago in our drug court from fentanyl. And I tell all of them, so sometimes I'm a tough love kind of judge. And I try different things with all of them. Sometimes I have them write their own obituary. I tell them that it's not fair that they would make their parents write their obituary. So I will ask them to write their own obituary that I will give to their parents. Sometimes I have them write letters to their children to explain why they couldn't stop using and why their children shouldn't feel that they didn't love them or love them more than the drugs. And I will say, I'm going to give this to your children. So I will tell all of them that they have value and that they matter and that they should, that their life matters, because I think for some of them, the life that they're living, they don't think they matter, and they certainly don't think anyone else cares. So I try very hard to make them know that their life matters and that they have value. But you just never know when you're going to actually say something that matters. And a young man graduated about a month ago, and he remembered that months prior, I was very angry with him and I called him a narcissist. And I said, if you don't know what that is, go look it up, because you're just a narcissist. You only care about one person, and that's you. And that stuck with him, and he remembered it. And at graduation, he said, "Am I still a narcissist?" And I had to tell him no, that he wasn't. And, but so I'm very frank as the judge of the specialty courts. Those courts allow me to have in contact with those individuals in that manner. Whereas as a judge sitting in a jury trial, I'm not allowed to have any contact like that. So these courts, I'm personally involved with these. I was invited to another girl's, she was graduating from a class up in Hillsborough, and she invited me to come up to this class for this graduation. Another girl, I don't know why, but she tattooed my name on her wrist. She actually tattooed my signature. She took my signature that when I signed her into the drug court, and she used that, and it was my worst signature ever. I'm like, oh, why would you do that? But so my relationship with them becomes very personal, sometimes more than I realize, to them. So they matter, and that's why I can't give it up, because if I give it up, I'm afraid it'll change. So.
Now, you said there are, during the drug court, there are 4 probation officers present, and who else is present during these court meetings?
The state's attorney, the assistant state's attorney, Tracy Baum, always is there for drug court. The public defender, Bill Barton, assistant public defender Bill Barton, is always present. The liaison for the public defender's office, Allison Hernandez, is present. There's 2 treatment providers from Chestnut who are always present, Kim and Ruth. The drug court coordinator, Kevin, is there. I'm there. Usually the jail has somebody there, because they bring people over from the jail for me to see. So there's usually a jail person there. And then all the clients will be there for court.
Mm-hmm. But you're the one who speaks. You're the one who speaks to the...
I do, but the probation officers will give a report in court so that the probationer is hearing what's being said. And then the attorneys are allowed to, sometimes these people are being sanctioned because they violated. So I'll hear from the attorneys, their recommendations and thoughts, and then I'll talk to the client and see what their thoughts are, and then I'll issue my ruling.
Interesting, yeah.
I was surprised at the low percentage of minorities that participated in the drug court. What are your thoughts on that?
So we try very hard to pull in more minorities into the courts, but it's
I'm glad you
voluntary.
asked that question. I was thinking that too. Thank you for asking that question.
So Phil White is currently the head of the probation for our drug court. Phil lives in Madison, and he and I confer often about how we can try to pull in more minorities. It's voluntary, so if they don't want to do it, they don't have to. And our court is a court where we will be in your life for at least 14 months, sometimes longer. And many people realize that it's easier just to be on probation. With all sincerity, it's easier just to have a probation officer that you might meet with once every 3 months, and treatment isn't nearly as intensive. And if people aren't ready for it, they just don't want it. So it's difficult to get people to join the drug court because of how difficult it is. But don't think we don't try, because we are. I will do appearances, and I will ask people if they're interested. Sometimes we'll pull people up when they have a preliminary hearing, and I'll ask them if they're interested in the drug court. So we'll keep trying, because we would like to get a lot more people involved. We'd like to get to a capacity of 125, with all sincerity, and we'd like to get many more minority involved.
And do you think transportation could be part of the problem?
We provide transportation.
Do you? Oh, good.
We have a bus that goes and picks up all of the clients every morning to take them to treatment, and we'll take them back home. It also it's a van, I say a bus, a van that also brings them to court. We provide bus tokens so that if they need bus tokens to be able to get to AA or NA or Smart Recovery, so we will provide MCT bus tokens so that everyone can have transportation. Treatment is free. If you're in the drug court, anybody that comes into the drug court, their treatment is free. So financially, there is no impact as far as that. And our drug court, if you successfully complete drug court, your fees, fines, and costs are waived. We can't waive restitution. So if you owe restitution to a victim, you have to pay that. But all fees, fines, and costs are waived for successful completion of our court, which if you're on regular probation, you have to pay for your treatment. You have to pay your fees, fines, and costs, which range usually about $3,000 to $3,500. So
it's interesting that you have like about 50-50 male to female ratio, but my guess is that there's more men that are arrested or charged with different things. Is that true? Do women more readily take to this, or?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
I don't know the statistic for the number of, someone would have to go in and I can use last year's statistic. There were 4,500 felony cases filed. So if you take 4,500 felony cases, you'd have to go in and see how many are men versus how many are women. But of those 4,500, then we pull out of that. Plus, if they're violent crimes, certain violent crimes obviously aren't even eligible for our court.
Okay. Thanks.
Judge Knapp, could you talk a little bit about how your courts interface with the community? You mentioned the Community Restorative Board, and we're hoping to have Keith back sometime in the fall to talk a little bit more about what that does. And you mentioned the Lions and the Rotary Club, that sometimes they provide opportunities for the people in your programs to do an activity. What other kinds of ways does your court or those people who go through that system interface with the community that we might need to be aware of? Or are there any opportunities that you're looking for, I guess?
Well, as I said earlier, if there's some type of event where you could use 50 pairs of hands, we would be interested in doing that. That's something that I would love to get us involved in. As far as mixing, so our specialty courts have gone and we have spoken at a number of organizations, and occasionally we have at these events, there's a mental health, they didn't do it last year, but it used to take place at Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville in St. Clair County. And it was a mental health conference. And we would go and speak at that as a specialty court. So it wasn't just me, it was my whole team. We would go and speak, and we would take a member of our drug court or mental health court to go and speak, because they would speak as well about what their involvement has been and what their impressions are. And we've done a number of conferences like that where we take members or clients, all voluntary, they never have to do it if they don't want to, that will come and talk about their experience in our courts and their experiences in general. And so we do that. We offer to go do the community service. And that's really, I would say, our involvement in the community. We offer to talk at any organization that wants us, we'll go and speak to them, but that's probably the extent of our involvement.
I've had a long time concern about expulsion from high school. Does that play a role in the people that end up in your court? And I understand that there is a movement for restorative justice in high school.
So I can't say whether or not someone was expelled, but I would say, if I was to guess, I would say at least half, if not 60% of the people in my court did not graduate high school. Whether it's because they dropped out or because they were expelled, I don't know. I always ask them when they first come into the court. I talk to every client and I kind of get their history. Where do you live? Who do you live with? Where'd you grow up? Do you have any children? Did you graduate from high school? And that's when that question comes in. So that's why we're really big into the GED and helping them with classes and with getting involved in taking the GED. We'll pay for that. So we have a 501c3 where we can raise money for our specialty courts. And that money is then used, for instance, to pay for them to take the GED, because it's not free and they don't have the money to pay for that. We'll use it to pay for them to take classes if they need to, or to get a tutor specifically. One boy, for instance, really had trouble with math, and we ended up getting him a tutor so that he could pass the math portion. Sometimes we have people that have zero clothes, zero. They literally are standing in the only clothes they own, and we're going to send them up to residential treatment and they have nothing. So we need to go buy them basic toiletries, and we'll go to Goodwill to get them some clothes. And so the money's in the 501c3, that's what it's used for, is for things like that. It all goes back to the clients.
Do you have a volunteer program at all?
So the drug court and the mental health court do not. The vet court does have a veteran mentor who actually works with some of the participants. But I would love to create a way to work with volunteers in our drug court and our mental health court. I haven't quite figured out how to do that, but I would love to. And any thoughts that you guys have or recommendations, I would love to meet with you and talk about that, because I don't know how to do it, but I think that would be good.
My husband worked for St. Louis County Juvenile Court, and he did GED, or was involved with the GED program. So I was just wondering if you have an organized program that everyone goes to, or is it just kind of everybody does their own thing?
So we work with SWIC. SWIC has a GED program that we've been using. Okay. And I know that there's another program that we got. I think it was the library in Edwardsville, I think, had a program. And we would work with the superintendent of schools, regional superintendent of schools. We would talk with them. Sometimes they had programs that they would recommend. So that's who we would go through to get our GED. But again, working with a volunteer, if someone's willing, I think for many of these individuals, being around, like Keith had said, being around someone that values them and that they see a different way of life, and that, matters and makes a difference for them.
I think it would be just one more person in the community that they would know that was hopefully a positive influence on their direction.
Yeah, I agree.
This is Carol. Does the court provide cell phones for them to keep in touch with their probation officers?
Yes, but most of them all have cell phones. It's funny. There's many things they can't have or don't want, but they all have cell phones. But there was one boy, or I say boy, he's the young man in mental health court who I was referring to. We went and bought him a track phone because we needed to be able to have contact with him. He was homeless and he had no phone. So we went and bought a track phone for him. We used to have phones that were provided through a grant, but those are gone. So we don't have that right now. but we haven't really had a problem. If someone doesn't have a cell phone, we're able to figure it out.
Okay, I was thinking of a specific person, so thanks.
Anything else? It's been.
What about learning disabilities? Do you find that many of these people have learning disabilities and they can't read? And
They don't have to be able to read to be in our program. We read everything to them and go over everything with them. I think we have all different levels of comprehension in both our mental health court and our drug court, and we kind of adapt. We have certain rules that we want everyone to follow, but we understand that everyone's different. So we work individually with each person to ensure that they are able to comply. I would say the only issue for our mental health court is that if someone has suffered a traumatic brain injury, that's really not a mental health issue. That's a traumatic brain injury. And nothing we do is going to change that or help them with that. So that's one of the exceptions to our mental health court.
You mean you don't take those people, or what do you mean?
We generally wouldn't take them because there's no doctor, there's no psychiatrist, there's no medicine that's going to change that person. Like that's a physical problem that they have as a result of a traumatic brain injury. Now, we did have one gentleman who had traumatic brain injury, but he also was bipolar. So we did work with him. It was really difficult, but we gave it a try because of the situation that he was in.
Do you find that in your veterans court, that some of those are returning veterans that have had brain injuries?
So I can't speak to that because I'm not the veterans court judge. So I don't know what their criteria is, but I know this: the vet court does not work with Chestnut or Centerstone. The vet court actually works with the VA, and there's someone from the VA that comes, and the VA coordinates all of their treatment, physical, medical, psychiatric, all of their treatment, controlled substance treatment, everything goes through the VA. And then that's all reported back to the vet court. So I think they do work with them, but they have a whole different system set up. They just have a lot more tools available to them in the veterans court.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to apologize for my computer that acted up at the beginning. And thank you, Judge, for being with us and adding to our knowledge. And
thank you.
My pleasure. And I appreciate you guys having me. And like I said, if there's anything that you need from me, you can call the number that's on that screen and that'll get you to the drug court. Keith knows how to get in touch with me. So does Becky. Becky and I have been emailing back and forth. So be happy to help out any way I can. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Take care.
bye.
Goodbye.